Hey, what is going on, guys? RvzStealth here, and in today's video we're going to be breaking down the 7 steps to winning laning phase every single game. So if you look to implement these steps into your games, I can almost guarantee that your ability to consistently win lane is going to improve drastically in your future games. So let's not waste any time at all. Let's jump right into number 1, and this is something that I think is the most important thing that you need to do in order to win your lane matchup consistently, and it's going to be to analyze your win conditions before the game even starts. So how you're going to start winning more lanes is not actually playing the lane itself. It's going to be analyzing win conditions when you're in loading screen, not tabbing out, not doing something random in loading screen. You're going to be looking at your matchup and asking yourself a bunch of different questions as to how you're going to win that matchup. So let's go over a couple different examples here as to what you should be looking at in the loading screen. First thing you want to look at is what are your level spikes. So do you hit a very good level 2 all-in spike? Do you have a very good level 3 spike? Is your level 1 even good? Do you have level 1 all-in potential? Ask yourself that, and also take a look at the enemy spikes too. Analyze if they have a good level 2 all-in. Do you have to play safer against them if they hit it before you? This is really important, especially for down in the bot lane, because a lot of bot lane champions can look to all-in at level 2 and get early kills. If you're playing an aggressive bot lane with like a Thresh, a Blitzcrank, a Leona, if you can push for that level 2, if you analyze your spike and analyze that win condition, then you can just find yourself getting a ton of early kills and snowballing the lane out of control very early on. Another win condition you could look at is, do you have the TP advantage? If you're playing top lane or mid lane, a lot of the time, like if you're running TP and the enemy has something like Ignite, or if they're playing like Darius top and they have Ghost and they don't have that teleport, you can look to take even trades in the laning phase, and that can be your win condition, because if you can chunk the enemy out in lane, if you can get them to like half HP or below half HP, and then you can base and use your teleport back to lane, you know, have the lane advantage. You can now look to pressure them really hard. You can look to get a freeze on them, force them to lose a ton of CS. So if you have the TP advantage, that can be your win condition in that lane. Another really good thing to look at is, do you have the ability to attack the enemy's mana pool in the laning phase to give yourself the advantage? So especially if you're playing like a resourceless champion or an energy champion into a mana based champion, then what you can look to do in the laning phase is you can look to trade HP for their mana. And by doing this, for example, I had a game a couple days ago. I was playing Rumble mid up against Cassiopeia, and I just wanted to trade aggressively into her in the laning phase because Cassiopeia has very high mana costs. If she looks to trade into me, she's gonna run really low on mana, and as Rumble, you don't have any mana at all. So as long as you can stay around half HP, you got the Doran shield on Rumble as well, you're gonna be able to stay in lane and sustain. And Cassiopeia, she wasn't running the teleport in that game, so all I had to do was take an even trade against her. She was out of mana, I was half HP, I could just pressure her, zone her from the wave, and get a nice freeze, and I pretty much just won the game by attacking her mana pool. And then if you do find yourself in a more difficult matchup, not every matchup is going to be winnable, right? You're not going to get a solo kill in every single matchup. That's just not reality. That's not going to happen. If you're in a more difficult matchup, winning lane sometimes just means going even in CS. If you're playing like a very good scaling champion, if the enemy is very snowball reliant, if you can just go even in lane with them, if you can reach the mid game and you don't feed them a ton of kills and they're not snowballing, then you're going to be much more useful than them in the mid to late game. For example, if you're playing something like Malzahar mid and you're going up against LeBlanc, if you can just get past the laning phase, get to the mid to late game, then you're going to be much more useful than her. And winning lane doesn't mean getting a solo kill, it just means going even and not allowing her to snowball. And then just completing an item can be a win condition as well for you. If you're playing a champion who spikes really hard off of their first base or off of their first core item, then you don't really need to play super aggressively until you hit that point. Play to your strength, right? If you're not able to win the 1v1 until you complete that item, then don't look to just take random trades because you want to play aggressive. Like, hit your spikes, play smart, and then look to play aggressive, and you're gonna find yourself winning lane a lot more often. Alright, so overall, just go into every game with a plan as to how you're gonna win lane. If you're just not focused on what you need to be doing before you get to lane, then if you gotta think about like during the laning phase, okay, how am I gonna do this? How am I gonna do that? It just wastes time, it wastes energy. You should be thinking about how you're gonna win lane before you even get into the game, because it just allows you to focus on other things that are much more important when you are in the game. So moving on to number 2 now, it's going to be play according to the jungle matchup. Believe it or not, the lane that you're playing is not a solo lane. It's not a 1v1. It's not a 2v2 down bot lane. Jungle impact is very important, and your lane is often dictated by like how your jungler is playing or how the enemy jungler is playing. So you can't just say, oh, jungle ganked me 3 times. It was a jungle diff. I just ended up losing because of the jungle. You have to play according to where the enemy jungler is looking to path, where your jungler is looking to path, and that's going to go into how you're able to play out the lane and how you look to win lane in a lot of your matchups. So to make sure you don't lose your lane very early on by dying to an early jungle gank, you should be respecting that 2-minute 45-second timer even earlier on. Like if you're playing up against a jungler like a Nunu, a Jarvan, a Xin Zhao who can level 2 gank you, then you should be warding before you even get to lane just to make sure you don't die to that level 2 gank. But most junglers like the Lee Sin, the Elise, the Kha'Zix, the Rek'Sai, the Warwick, they're going to look to gank you at level 3 at that 2-minute 45-second timer. So you should be respecting that every single game. You should be looking to ward before then, or just looking to play a little bit safer at that timer. To know which lane the enemy jungler is going to be ganking early on, you just want to take a look at which of your top lane or your bot lane arrived to lane first. If your bot lane arrives to lane first, then chances are the enemy jungler started on the top side of the map, so he's going to be pathing from top lane down to bot lane. If your top lane ends up showing to lane first, then chances are the jungler started bot, so he's going to be doing a bot to top side clear. And by using this information, you can know whether or not you can play more aggressive there at that 2-minute 45-second timer, or as to whether or not you should be playing a little bit safer. So just start playing according to your jungle matchup. If your jungler is a weaker early game jungler, then don't be expecting them to give you a level 3 gank or give you a ton of ganks in the early game. If they're playing something like a Karthus, a Master Yi, or a Nocturne, you know they're going to be farming. You know they're not going to be ganking as much as something like a Lee Sin or a Jarvan or an Elise. So you got to play based off of that. If your jungler is just farming his jungle, if he's not looking to make any aggressive plays, you got to play a little bit safer in lane because you know you don't have that backup. If your jungler though is playing something like that Lee Sin or an Elise or Jarvan, and they're looking to invade or they're looking to contest scuttle, then you got to play off of that accordingly. So you got to look to shove out your lane, you got to look to try to get priority, roam over and help them. So depending on the jungle matchup, you should be changing how you play early on in the laning phase. So moving on to step number 3 now, look to take trades when the enemy is at a disadvantage, and there's a couple different disadvantages the enemy can have in the laning phase. So number 1 is going to be when the enemy is looking to go for like a last hit on a minion, and especially on the cannon minion, you should be looking to take advantage of this and look to pressure them. So if you're playing a very aggressive laner and you're going up against a champion who doesn't have the best ability to trade against you in the laning phase, let's say you're playing something like Echo mid and you're going up against a Lux, if you can just walk forward as that Echo when the Lux is looking to go for that cannon minion, it forces her to like back off, and if she uses her ability to try and last hit that cannon minion, then after that you can look to very easily trade into her and win the trade guaranteed, because you're gonna have the ability advantage. Her E is gonna be down. Like if you move up and zone her from that cannon and she has to use E on it, then you can look to just play very aggressively onto her after that, because you now have the ability advantage. So you should be looking to play around those low HP minions, especially down in the bot lane. If you're playing an aggressive support and the enemy is going for that cannon minion, then that's your window as to when you can look to engage on them, because they're not going to want to give up that cannon minion. This is really important if you're playing a skill shot oriented champion. It's just going to make it so much easier for her to hit those skill shots in the laning phase, because when the enemy is going for that last hit, there's going to be a split second as to where they have to be stationary. They can't dodge out on their ability when they're going for that last hit in their auto attack animation. So that's the moment as to where you should be looking to strike with your skill shot, and you're going to find yourself hitting so many more skill shots in the laning phase if you can focus on when your minions get low, and then when the enemy goes for that last hit, look to punish them. What you'll see a ton of in the lower elos as well is players will just randomly use abilities on the wave, and they'll just continue to sit in the middle of the lane, not even act like anything has changed. And if you notice them at a disadvantage there, if they just randomly are using abilities on the wave and not hitting you with them, then look to take advantage of that window. Look to trade with them when their abilities are down and yours are up, because it means you're going to be at a much higher chance at winning that trade. So step number 4 now, once you do get that first kill in the laning phase, if you kill your opponent, you want to make sure that you're not staying around too long and you're not greeting for a tower plate. You want to make sure you keep your tempo up in the laning phase, keep pressure in lane, don't allow the enemy to have any breathing room. This is a very common mistake you're going to see a lot of low elo players make, is that they'll just end up staying way too long. They'll delay their base time way too long. They'll allow the enemy to get back to lane, shove in the wave, and then look to go for a roam play. And even though you've got that kill on them in the laning phase, you've kind of just thrown your lane there by delaying your base, because if you delay that base and you allow the enemy to roam, get a double kill down bot lane, then what you've done for yourself in lane is completely just erased, because now the enemy has a double kill. So you really want to make sure you're arriving back to lane the same time as your opponent so that you can continue pressuring them and so you don't allow them to make a play on the map and help their team out. So for step number 5 now, a lot of players just don't really understand when they should be basing during the laning phase, and they just struggle with getting a good base timing in. So if you find yourself going even in lane, or if you're winning lane especially, you should always be getting yourself a good base timing. And a good base timing, or one of the best base timings, is when the cannon minion wave is arriving. So what you want to look to do is shove the wave in before the cannon wave arrives. As that cannon wave is arriving, you want to be channeling your recall, you want to be basing, because when the cannon wave reaches lane, it's going to take the enemy laner a lot more time to shove out that cannon wave, because the cannon minion is more tanky. Once the enemy cannon wave hits your tower, it's going to be tanking up a lot more tower shots, so it's just going to allow you a lot more time to get back to lane so that you don't lose out on any XP and gold. So with these last 2 steps here, it's just all about reducing the downtime you have in the laning phase. You always want to be able to have pressure in lane. You don't want to give the enemy laner any opportunity to out pressure you, and you don't want to give them any opportunity to look to make a roam play and just impact the map before you can. So moving on to step number 6 now, that's going to have to do with how you should be looking to manipulate your wave depending on how the game is going. So should you be looking to shove and roam? Should you look to freeze? Or should you look to slow push? So let's first talk about freezing here and when you should be looking to do it. So I think freezing can be really good very early on in the game. I think the first couple levels, if you can set a freeze, it just makes the enemy a lot more vulnerable to ganks. It allows for your jungler to very easily set up a gank and pick up an early kill. I think once you do reach later on though in the laning phase, and especially at level 6, freezing becomes a lot less valuable, just because if you're playing like mid or top and you're going up against a very strong roaming champion, say you're going up against a Talon mid or a Katarina or a Pyke, it doesn't really matter too much if you set a freeze if they're just gonna roam bot and pick up a double kill, or if they're just gonna roam top and pick up a kill. So it's a lot more important for you to just keep pressure, keep shoving them under tower, force them to come back to lane, because even though you could get like a 30 or 40 CS lead on them by freezing, that's not really gonna matter if your bot lane is just 0-5 because the enemy laner is constantly roaming. So in order for you to set a freeze, you need about 4 more minions on the enemy side than on yours, and you just want to be trying to lock that wave in front of your tower there, not allow it to crash into your tower, keep it in front of your tower, and it's just going to allow you to play very safe in lane. It's going to make the enemy laner be a lot more vulnerable. They're gonna have to push up in lane to try to get CS. So if you have the opportunity to freeze, if there's not really any roam opportunity on the map, if there's nothing really going on the map, then I think freezing can be really good throughout the early parts of the laning phase. So once you've already got a couple kills in lane, or once the laning phase is coming to an end, I think that freezing is a lot less valuable. You should be looking to just hard shove the wave in, look to either pressure for the enemy's tower or look to pressure for a roam around the map. That's gonna win you solo queue games a lot more than you just setting a freeze in front of your tower, because you're not going to gain anything around the map by setting that freeze. Yes, you're going to gain maybe a little bit of an XP advantage, maybe you'll gain a bit of a gold advantage, but that's not going to be how you're going to win solo queue games a lot of the time. And then as for when you want to slow push, you want to slow push when you have the ability to zone the enemy from CS, but you're not able to get that freeze. So if the wave is even, if there's not 4 more minions on the enemy side than on yours, but you still have the ability to like pressure the enemy in lane and you can still like move up and zone them, then just look to slow push into their tower. So this is going to deny them a lot of CS. If they do end up greeting and moving forward for CS, then you can look to capitalize on that. So this is especially important down in the bot lane, and you'll see this this here in the background gameplay, Doublelift playing the MF in this game, he's only lasting hitting the minions, so that's what you want to do for a slow push. You only want to be lasting the minions, don't shove the wave at all, let that stack up, let that crash into the enemy's tower, and it's just going to allow you to zone them from a lot of CS. It will allow you more time to look for a base time. This is also a good opportunity for you to look to base because you stack up that big wave, forces the enemy to have a lot more time under tower CSing, so it gives you more time to look to go for that base. And it's also a good opportunity for you to look to go for a roam as well. If you stack up a big wave, just gives you a lot more time to look for a roam play or look to make a play around the map. And then lastly here for step number 7, to ensure that you don't throw your lead in the laning phase, you always want to be warding accordingly based on how you're playing in lane. So if you're playing more aggressively in lane, if you're shoving up to the enemy's tower, pressuring them under tower, you want to make sure that you do have deeper vision. So don't just be warding the river bush. This is a mistake that so many players make. All they do is like plan to ward in the river bush, and that really doesn't help you very much at all if you're pushed all the way to the enemy's tower, because it just doesn't give you enough time to react to that gank. You're gonna die to that gank 9 times out of 10, so you want to make sure you're getting vision deeper in the river, or get some vision down in the enemy's jungle. You can even get some vision down on their camps to see when they're taking their camps and stuff like that. So ward accordingly based on how you're playing in lane. Alright, so that's going to be all for the video, guys. Those are 7 steps to winning the laning phase, and hopefully if you do look to implement these steps in your future games, you do give yourself a much better chance at winning lane and just being more consistent in your games. So that being said, if you guys enjoyed the video, be sure to drop a like and subscribe if you have yet to already. So thanks for watching, have an awesome day, and I will see you in my next video.